Hi, everybody, and welcome back to a special session. In this session, we're joined by Lina Bruni, who's one of the top graduates from Niagara College's practical nursing program. She's going to give us a bit of advice about the job search and answer some of the questions that you put forward to me that you wanted to ask of a new grad. So first of all, Lina, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, no problem. It's my pleasure.
Now, if you could just bring us through your history. You graduated from practical nursing what year?
I believe it was 2018.
Okay, so you've been out in the workforce for a little while now. And I know
hmm
you had a bit of a path into practical nursing. Can you tell us a bit about your educational background before you decided on nursing?
Um, well, I kind of went through different programs through Niagara College and eventually went to Brock and got my bachelor's from Brock. Um, it was when I took a medical terminology course through Brock that I was interested in going into nursing. And that's when I took medical office administration before going into the practical nursing program.
Wow, okay. So you definitely did do a lot of work before you went into nursing.
hmm
Now, the people who are listening to this are currently term two.
Okay.
Can you give us a bit of a sense of what your journey through the practical nursing program was like? Was it what you expected?
It was stressful. Um, and I'm sure that they can relate to that. It was a pretty stressful adventure, but I got through it, as did all of my classmates. Um, but what I learned was, if no matter how challenging it is, just stick with it and you'll get through it. And definitely stick as close to your friends as possible. Work together with your friends as much as possible when it comes to your skills, when it comes to studying, because they can really be a great resource and they can be a confidence boost when you're struggling. So that would be my advice for that.
Your piece of advice. Okay, great. And then a lot of people are curious before we actually start talking about the job search, about the licensing exam. Can you tell us a bit about your experience with the licensing exam? Oh, and I've lost Lena's audio.
Can you repeat that? You
Oh,
kind of cut out a little bit.
yeah, of course. People were curious about your experience with the licensing exam. Can you tell us
Oh,
a
okay.
bit what that was like?
Yes, actually, I'm helping a student right now with her studying. I just had a FaceTime chat with her on Friday to help her with some studying. So, um, what I would recommend is definitely invest in the textbooks that can help. I know the one I used was just look here, it's on my desk, the Saunders NCLEX exam prep book. And then I also had another one. I don't have it with me right now. That was another textbook. It was a smaller one that helped with the questions, breaking down exam questions and determining what the question is really asking, because a lot of nursing exam questions tend to put a lot of fluff into the question
Right,
and really have to sit there and kind of get past the fluff to determine what the question's actually asking. So for
right,
example, the question could be giving you a history of the patient, and all you need to know what the question is asking is your assessment. It's an assessment question. So
right,
despite them giving you the history of they're married, they have a 4-year-old child, they're a teacher, whatever that is kind of irrelevant when you realize that the multiple choice answers are assessment answers. So all of that fluff, you kind of have to put all that aside to know what the question is actually asking you. And that is kind of a branch of studying in itself, is knowing what the question is asking you. And that will lead you to the right answer, because I wouldn't necessarily say the questions are trick questions. They're more trying to get you to think about what it's actually asking you. So in regards to studying, I would say you need to study how to analyze the question as one form of studying, and the other form of studying would be your knowledge. So everything that you've learned in nursing school, all of your information that you have from your textbooks. I know it seems overwhelming. It is a lot of information, but I found the more knowledge you have going into the exam, the more prepared you are, even though you're using a small fraction of that knowledge for the exam. So the more studying you can put in, the more time you can put in, is better. But I also advised this student that I was speaking to on Friday that you also have to take into mind self-care. It is a very stressful time. There's a lot of information you need to study, but also take time for yourself. If you like to sit and watch Netflix, sit and watch Netflix for an hour, um, eat a comfort food. If some days you are just feeling like, I can't open a textbook today, I can't read anything today, don't push yourself, because you're just going to drive yourself to the point where you're not going to want to study.
Right.
Um, so I would say definitely pace yourself with your studying. Use the resources that you have, use your textbooks. If you want to do study groups with friends, if that works for you for studying, you can work in study groups. If you prefer to work independently, that's fine as well. So it is very stressful. But again, I would highly recommend that students definitely do some form of self-care, whether it's going for a walk, doing exercise, like I said, binge watching Netflix,
Right.
cuddling with your pets,
Right.
whatever it takes, because if you just sit there and study all hours of the day, you're just going to exhaust yourself. You're going to lose that knowledge. And actually taking a break can, when you come back to your studying after taking that break, you can actually be more refreshed. Your brain's more alert. You can take in more information. So I would say when it comes to the exam, what you need to do for studying is study what the question is asking you, break down the question to figure out what it's asking, study your knowledge, everything that you've learned. Definitely use the study textbooks that are out there, and also to do some self-care as well.
Great. Well, I'm a huge advocate of taking breaks. So I
Hmm.
think that was some excellent advice. I think you're right. I think you give yourself a bit of a break, you do come back fresher and you are
Hmm.
able to handle the stress a lot better. Very, very
Hmm.
true.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. So you wrote your licensing exam, and a little bird told me you were successful the first time.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, which is fantastic. And then you started on your job search.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? What were you
Okay.
looking at? What sorts of nursing were you considering?
Okay, so once I graduated, what you have to do is you apply for your license through the CNO. You'll
Right?
receive notification of how to do that. I believe you do it all online, but you will receive, whether it's an email or snail mail, you will get notified that you've passed. Now you can register. I also highly recommend that RPN students register with the RPNAO, so the Registered Practical Nurses Association of Ontario. They are now called We RPN. But I highly recommend that you register with them as well, because they cover your insurance
Right.
when you're actually practicing.
Right.
And there are all kinds of member benefits. For example, you can get a discount at Mark's Work Warehouse if you show
Oh,
your RPNAO card. So there are member benefits for that as well. So what I did is I received my notification, and I registered for both at the beginning of November of 2018, and thus began the job search. Um, it's stressful too, looking for a job. And I actually was not successful finding a job until July of 2019. I
okay.
applied for anything and everything I possibly could. I know a lot of my classmates wanted to get in full time at the hospital because you get your benefits and all of that. But I would say apply for everything that you can, and just take what you can get to get your foot in the door, get started, get some experience. For me, I started in a retirement home, and I found it an extremely rewarding experience. It was a great place to start.
Oh,
You are using your knowledge, you are using your skills. I found it not to be as intense as like my placements working in the hospital.
right.
Um, It's a little bit more laid back. You have PSWs working with you. You have the executive members of the retirement home that you can use as resources, like the director of care. And I found that the residents were absolutely wonderful. So I would say just apply for what you can, get some experience first. And then once you start working, you might start realizing what area you want to specialize in. For example, for me, I'm highly interested in mental health. So right now I'm working on the mental health certificate through Mohawk College.
Oh, okay.
And there are different colleges that offer different certificate programs. So if you like emergency medicine, there is an emergency medicine course. If you're interested in the OR, there is an OR course that you can take. If you like geriatrics, which is working with seniors, you can take a geriatrics course. So you can do all of this to specialize, and that will make you more marketable when it comes to applying for jobs. So you can go to school and do those certificate courses while you're working as well.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, so I would say just start wherever you can. Um,
Okay.
I, a lot of people want to get in at the hospital full time, but it is a journey to get there, as I know from my friends who have done it. Um, but I would just say start with a job to get some experience, get used to working in the real world because you are out on your own now. You don't have a preceptor like you did in consolidation. You don't have a supervisor like you did during your placement. So, where you do have a team, so you have, for example, if you're working in the hospital part time or casual, you have the nurses there that you can work with. You have the charge nurse. If you're working in long-term care, you've got your PSWs, you've got your RN, who's there as a resource as well. So I would say definitely just start wherever you can. It might not be what you want to do long term, but at the beginning, it's all about getting experience, because the more experience you can get at the beginning, the more skilled you're going to be. And the more experience and skills you have, the more you can put on your resume that makes you more marketable.
Right. Right. Okay. So were you surprised at your reaction in long-term care? Like, did you go into it thinking that's what you wanted, or?
I did my consolidation in long-term care and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I had an incredible preceptor who I'm a very introverted kind of person, so I'm very shy. I don't have a lot of confidence in myself, which obviously was reflected in my skills tests in nursing school. But he really just brought me out of my shell. He was amazing. He boosted my confidence, and I would say it wasn't even a third of the way through my consolidation that I felt completely comfortable doing everything on my own. Yes, of course, I had to ask him questions, things that I wasn't sure of. And I would also recommend that as well, no matter whether you're in a placement, you're in your consolidation, or whether you're actually working. If you're not sure, ask somebody.
Right.
Never, ever, ever take a chance of putting a patient at risk. If you're not sure, ask somebody.
Right.
So for me, I love the long-term care sector. It is emotionally challenging because you are working with seniors who are at the end of their life, and
Mm-hmm.
it is not for everybody. But just being in that environment, the seniors are wonderful people. They have so many stories to tell, if you have the time to listen. Um, Sometimes you do get time to listen if you get all of your meds done and you get all of your charting done and you can chat with them for a couple minutes. They have wonderful stories. Um, and they're really, most of them honestly are really wonderful people, even the ones who have mental health issues or who have physical challenges. They really are wonderful people. And that kind of led me into leaning towards going into retirement, the retirement sector to start,
Right.
because I already had some experience in that area.
Right.
Um, so it might not be what I want to do long term. Like I said, I'm focusing on mental health, but again, starting there, some seniors do have mental health issues. So for me, it's great to see, not great to see, but as an experience
Right.
wise,
Right.
you can kind of see and witness what's kind of mental health issues seniors are facing.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
so you can also apply that. I can apply that to my mental health knowledge that I'm going to through my certificate program.
Right. Fantastic. Okay. So let's think about, you end up with the first call for an interview for your first job, first
Mm-hmm.
nursing job.
Mm-hmm.
What was the interview experience like?
Like every job interview, stressful, stressful, stressful. But I found if there is a way for you to prepare, then do so. For example, for me, because I was going into the retirement sector, I had a feeling that I was going to be asked a question about blood glucose,
Ah, okay.
meaning that if my interviewer asked me if this resident had a very low blood glucose or blood sugar when you took it, how would you resolve it? And I had a feeling that question was going to come up because it's a very common issue with seniors to have a low blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually learned that quite frequently doing my consolidation. So I had a feeling he was going to ask me that, and he did. So I was prepared. I had the answer. What you would do is you would give them a spoonful of honey, some orange juice, something to help bring up their sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And after, I believe it's about an hour, you would check their sugar again. Hopefully by then it's stabilized. If it's still low, then you need to take the next steps to resolve it.
Right.
So depending on what sector you're going into to start, like I said, if it's long-term care, those kinds of questions may come up in a job interview. So try and be prepared for questions like that. Um, Perhaps questions may come up relating to vitals. What would you, for example, what would you do if this person had a low blood pressure? What would you do if this person is having difficulty breathing? What would you do? Um,
Right.
there are some, I would say, patient or client centered questions that will probably come up because they want to know where your knowledge is at and how you're actually going to apply that knowledge in real
Right.
life
Right.
situations.
So these were situation type questions, if we put it
Yes.
into job interview talk, where they give
Yeah.
you a situation and then ask you how you would respond.
Yes.
Okay, so you did get some of those. Okay.
Mhm.
Did you get any of the awkward, tell me about yourself type of questions?
Yes, yes, and I will admit I tend to ramble with those kinds of questions just because I'm nervous,
Of
and
course.
you end up giving them more information than you probably should.
Right.
But yes, there are those kinds of questions, but I think they're asking, from a nursing perspective because I wanna see what kind of personality you are,
Mm-hmm.
and how your personality is going to be reflected in your practice.
Right.
So if you're like me and you're very shy and introverted, how is that going to impact your ability to do your job? Uh,
Right.
so at first for me, I was a little shaky, being on kind of unstable ground and unfamiliar ground, even with my training, being out on my own and, being the one in charge of everything now, it's a little intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but even if you're someone like me who doesn't have a lot of confidence in yourself, that confidence will grow because you're working with people who can help you. And
Right.
like I said, if ever you are in a position where you don't know what to do, always ask someone for help.
Right.
Because the last thing you want to do is put a patient, a resident, or a client at risk.
Right. Right.
And you
Okay.
also don't want to put your license in jeopardy as
Of
well.
course, yeah. Okay,
Mhm.
excellent advice. So now these questions sound kind of silly, but they're not. They did come up. Somebody
Mhm.
wanted to know what you wear to a job interview.
I wore business casual attire. So I wore slacks, I wore heels, and I wore a blouse.
Okay.
Um, it would be like for any other job interview. Dress business casual. You don't have to go super fancy, but just make yourself presentable. Obviously, make sure your hair is presentable. Make sure you're not wearing excessive jewelry. Um, if you had tattoos, do try to cover them up. Some places don't care, but just for the job interview,
Just
just
in
make yourself
case.
as
Yeah.
yeah, make yourself as presentable as possible, for
Okay.
sure.
So would you say like plain, clean, professional was sort of the way to go?
Yes,
Like neat
yes.
and tidy? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay,
Mhm.
that fits with what everyone else has told me about their experience in job interviews
Mhm.
in terms of clothing.
Mhm.
That you want stuff that looks functional, like you're a
Mhm.
professional,
Yep.
and nothing like too eye-catching or flashy or anything.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, and I would also say I know that a lot of, women like to have their nails done. Um, if possible for a job interview, do try to not have that. Um, and then if your boss or whoever doesn't care while you're actually working, that my boss did not care if I had, nail polish on. Um, while I was working, a lot of places discourage it, but
right.
for the job interview, I would, like I said, like as professional as possible, clean nails, um, uh, business casual attire, and professional appearance.
Professional. Okay, that's
Mhm.
great advice. I always say you can't go wrong with a pair of black pants and a white
Nope.
top,
Nope.
whether you're male or female, right? It's a
Hmm.
classic look.
Hmm.
It's very businesslike, and again, not flashy or distracting or anything like that.
Hmm.
Okay, excellent advice. How long was your interview? Your first interview? Do you
Um,
can you think how long
I
it took?
I think it was about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay,
Um, yeah, because he asked me questions. Um, I asked him questions, and that is something that I think is also important when it comes to job interviews. Come with questions because
right,
that shows that you're actually interested in the job. It doesn't matter if it's something as ridiculous as, do I have to wear certain colored scrubs?
right, right.
Is there certain shoes I have to wear? Um, is there additional schooling or training I have to do for this job?
Mm-hmm.
Um, any of those kinds of questions, always come prepared to ask questions because that shows that you're interested in the job and that you're really going to put your best foot forward because you're going to have that knowledge before you, if you're successful with that interview, you're going to have that knowledge before you even start your job.
Right, right,
um, so it was a two-way question and answer at first, and basically I was hired on the spot, which I was very fortunate to
wow,
be hired. And because he told me I was hired on the spot, he went through some of the policies and the procedures and kind of what to expect with the job, who your team is. So he was the general manager. There's also the director of care who's part of your team. I had PSWs that were part of my team. Um, so he kind of went through all of that as well, just so that you know what you're walking into.
right,
And then he also said that he was going to contact me with a training schedule.
wow,
So what I would recommend as well is once you're hired, they should be doing some form of training to get you orientated to wherever you're working, whether it's a retirement home, long-term care, a hospital unit. They should be doing some form of training. If they don't, I would definitely request it.
right,
And I went through my 2 weeks of training, and I think it was about 2 or 3 shifts of training, um, to which I still wasn't quite comfortable being out on my own just yet. I did
right,
not feel comfortable doing the meds by myself, just getting used to the routine of how to do everything because it is overwhelming, especially if you're working days. Days are very, very busy.
right,
Um, so I actually approached the manager and said, would I be able to have another 1 or 2 training sessions just because I'm not completely confident and comfortable being on my own just yet. And he was completely agreeable to it because he said he would rather me be comfortable um, doing what I'm doing than not being comfortable and possibly making a mistake. So,
fantastic.
so
Yeah,
if you're not comfortable and you've gone through your training, there, do not hesitate to ask and say, I need a little bit more training or I need a little bit more support, and
right,
request, and hopefully they will accept.
right. Okay. Now, what was it like going in? You were under or on your team, you have an RN, and then you
Mhm.
have PSWs that are working with you as well. Was there any challenge with that, like with interrelationships or anything at work coming in as a new person, new part of the team?
So it's a little bit different between long-term care and retirement home.
Mm-hmm.
Retirement home does not have the RN there, that
Okay.
long-term care has.
Right.
But you do have the director of care who
Right.
can be an RPN. So they would be your go-to person if there is an issue with meds or there's an issue with a resident. So if there's something that you need to go to someone, whether it's a behavioral issue, a medication issue, a family issue, the director of care would be who you would go to in a retirement setting.
Right.
In a long-term care setting, it would be your RN.
Right. Right.
So the RN would be your resource for meds, for wound care. So it's a little bit different between retirement and long-term care. Personally, I liked retirement better, because retirement home, the residents don't require quite as much hands-on care.
Right.
It's more you're giving them their medications and you're doing some basic assessments, where long-term care was much more hands-on. You are doing the wound care, you are doing the meds, whereas in retirement, um, outside sources and outside agencies, say for example St. Elizabeth's, would come in and take care of a particular resident's wound.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
where you might be responsible in a retirement setting to just keep an eye on the wound to make sure it's not getting infected, it might not be your job to do the wound care because an outside agency is managing it.
Right.
But you would still probably be required to just assess it, make sure it's not infected, because the last thing you want is to have somebody have an infection that starts to get quite serious
Right.
in
Right.
a matter of hours.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
but
Okay.
again, anywhere you go, you are going to have a team. Even though
Hmm.
you feel like you're working independently, no matter where you are, whether it's in the hospital, long-term care, retirement, you will have a team. So in a retirement setting, you have your PSWs. So you have your PSWs who actually work for the facility.
Right.
And like I said, some residents have PSWs from outside agencies who come in, or they have nurses who come in from those agencies to do, like I said, do wound care,
Right.
um, do foot care, things like that. Um, in a long-term care setting, again, you had your team of PSWs. You have your RN as your resource. In the hospital, you are more independent, but you do have other nurses who are working that shift. So if you have a question, I know they're always busy, but if you can ask one of them a question, ask them.
Right.
You also have your charge nurse, who's there on shift. That is a tremendous resource if you're not sure of something. So anywhere you go, you will always have a team.
Right. What was working with personal support workers like? Did you supervise them or?
I found uh, in both settings, so long-term care and retirement, the PSWs know what they have to do.
Right.
They know what their job is, they know their routine, they know the routine of the residents. So they really are kind of on their own in the sense that they don't need you to dictate to them what to do.
Right.
Because especially if they're highly experienced and they've been doing this for a long time, they know what they're doing. And the last thing you want to do is question them
Right.
and have there be interrelationship issue.
Hmm.
Um, of course, if there's something that a PSW is required to do that's part of their scope of practice, um, you would have a conversation with them about that. There have been times where I was working and I would say, there would a resident would call down to the nursing station and say that they needed something, and I was in the middle of my meds doing my med pass,
Hmm.
and I would say, to if a PSW was available, I'd say, hey, can you just go up and see what they need, and if it's something that I had to do as a nurse, to whether it was a medication, like they have a headache, or they needed a med for that or something.
Right.
The thing is the more respect that you show for the people you're working with, the more respect you're going to get in return. So respect
Right.
is a two-way street. Kindness is a two-way street. Yes, it is a stressful job, but try to rein in your frustrations, the stress, the exhaustion, and just try to work well with your team, because the more you work well with your team, the better off everyone is going to be, the smoother your shift is going to go. Um, of course, there's always things that come up in a shift. There's emergencies and things
Sure.
that you might expect. But if you can maintain good professional relationships with those you're working with, it's going to make your life a heck of a lot easier.
Right,
Because you
right.
don't need the additional stress on top of what you're already doing as for your nursing job.
Okay. Well,
Mhm.
one last question, Lena, because we're at the half hour mark and everything that you provided us with has been so interesting. I feel
Mhm.
like we could just go on for hours. I had a
We
very
could.
special request to
Mhm.
ask you what the best nursing shoe is.
Okay. Um, that's I would honestly say that is personal preference.
Hmm.
I highly recommend a shoe that is comfortable. Um, you don't want to wear something that looks flashy and is not going to be comfortable because you are going to be either working 8 or 12-hour shifts.
Right,
And you need to have something that is supporting your foot, it's supporting your back. Um, Me personally, I was working 8-hour shifts and I was wearing Saucony running shoes.
right,
So those were supportive for my feet. They're comfortable to walk around in. Um, some nurses like to wear compression stockings because it helps the circulation in their legs when they're working the 12-hour shifts. Some prefer that. Um, but most that I've seen are always wearing comfortable running shoes.
wow. Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
So a good supportive running shoe is your
Yes. Yes.
recommendation. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, Lena, I want to thank you very much for joining us. And I also want to thank you. You have offered to allow this class to see your resume and to see your cover letter.
Hmm.
So I know everyone is so appreciative of that, to actually see a real world example.
Hmm.
Again, we want to thank you very much. I wish the students were here with me because I know they would be cheering. And thank you very much for your time and for everything that you do for our community.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Anytime, anytime anyone has any questions, whether it's through you or someone wants to email me, I'm always happy to help.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lena.
You're
Bye
very
for now.
welcome.
Bye bye.
Bye.